All right, hey everybody, it's Ed O'Keefe, and welcome to the Ed O'Keefe Show. I'm here with my new favorite author, soon to be, what will you be called once your miniseries, your Amazon miniseries goes up?
Jack. Yeah.
Jack Carr. No, okay, so author and, the writer behind the Terminalist series. Jack led special operations teams as a team leader, platoon commander, troop commander, and task unit commander. Over his 20 years in naval special warfare, he transitioned from an enlisted SEAL sniper to a junior officer leading assault and sniper teams in Iraq and Afghanistan. When you guys were very, very busy.
It was a busy time. It was good. It was a good run.
To a platoon commander practicing counterinsurgency in the southern Philippines, to commanding a special operations task unit in the most Iranian-influenced section of southern Iraq throughout the tumultuous drawdown of the U.S. forces. More excitingly right now is author of the Terminalist book series that is just amazing, with the protagonist James Reese, who we're going to talk a ton about today. And this is very timely because this is now been turned into an Amazon miniseries featuring Chris Pratt.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
so
right.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I mean,
thank
super
you. It's been
exciting.
busy. Yeah.
Super
We're doing this in the middle of a book tour right now, or near the end of it anyway.
Yeah.
It's been busy, but it's been great. The crowds, I mean, there's definitely a shift. My last in-person book tour was 2019, and then COVID hit right as the third book was hitting, and then it was all those restrictions were still in place for the next one. So this is the first time I've been on the road for a book tour since 2019.
Wow.
And there's a difference. Like, the crowds are crazy. They're out the door, around the corner of these places. It's insane. And I feel very humbled.
Because book tours did they die down a little bit over the last 10 years? And then, I'm looking on Instagram at your photos of your book tour or your book signings, and the place is packed.
Yeah.
And people are pretty excited about you.
They're very excited about it. I don't know if me or, hopefully it's the books, but or both, whatever. But I just like to be able to thank people and shake their hand, and because I couldn't do what I love doing, which is the writing part, without them taking a risk on me in many cases as a new author, and then telling a friend.
Yeah.
And whether that friend is one person or 5 people, or in Chris Pratt's case, 35 million people.
Yeah.
I just like to be able to say thank you in person, and I can do it on Instagram and on the social channels. I can say that's one of the things I really like about the social channels, is that I can say thank you.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, when my wife's asleep next to me, I'm just still hitting that little like button, and then I'm saying thank you.
Oh, so that's you then, huh?
That is me.
Yeah, I love
that is me. Because I just I don't know. I just feel like people are trusting me with their time, and I want to be a good guardian of that time, and that trust. So I put a lot of thought into whether it's an Instagram post, or it's a chapter in the book, or a blog article, no matter a guest on my podcast, question for them, whatever it might be. So all of me goes into that. But I love to say thank you to everybody, because without them I couldn't do what I love doing.
I love it. Well, you sucked me in, so thank you. It really, I've banged through all 5 of your books, just finished In the Blood.
Nice.
Was sitting there saying there's no frickin' way, probably for a good few minutes, where my wife yells across the kitchen, is like, I had my earbud in. She's like, "Are you with us right now?"
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
So how do you describe who James Reese is?
Yeah, as a character, he has a background very similar to mine, and he was a prior enlisted SEAL sniper, and then at some point he becomes an officer, and then when the reader meets him in the first book, The Terminalist, he's finishing up that last deployment in Afghanistan, and he knows that his family needs him, and that'll be the last time he's tactically maneuvering guys on the battlefield, so it's going to be time to get out and move on, and that's where I was when I got back from my last deployment, and my family needed me. I had worked my way up to troop commander, task unit commander in southern Iraq, and really that's the last time. So as an 04, as an officer, they're going to tactically maneuver guys on the battlefield. If I stayed in, or if anyone stays in, they go to staff jobs, and then eventually they cycle back as a team commanding officer, which sounds very impressive, but in today's day and age, if you're an 05 and you're in the tactical operations center, so you're allocating assets, essentially, you're not out there kicking in doors with the guys anymore. And so I done what I came in to do, and my family needed me, so it was very clear to me that it was time to get out and start this next journey into writing. So it's no coincidence that that's where the reader meets James Reese.
Yeah.
But then from there, it goes into a completely fictional narrative.
So you fictional. How do you want to, like, with Terminalist? It starts off with he's about to exit, and then chaos ensues in his life with upturns that.
Yep, and I got some of that from the church hearings in the 70s, where a lot of the overreach by certain agencies in the federal government, particularly the CIA, came to light. And one of those things that came to light was the testing of drugs on prisoners, college students, mental institution patients, and members of the military. So some changes were instituted after those hearings in the 70s, and I thought, hey, what if somebody didn't get the memo and they once again test drugs, this time on our nation's most elite soldiers, and there are some repercussions, and they need to cover it up. So that's where I got the conspiracy side of the house, because I needed James Reese to go into combat thinking he was already dead, and I got that from the samurai tradition of Bushido, where they would go into battle thinking they were already dead because they thought that made them more effective and efficient warriors. Yeah. So I thought, how do you take that and apply that to a modern warrior? And so that's where the testing of the drugs came in, and that's where the church hearings came in, and that's how that whole first story got moved forward.
Yeah. Wow. And so I'm like trying to not ask questions that lead too much or kind of divulge too much. You've said before, like each one of your books carries a theme, and so specifically, what would you say? Like, do you mind walking us through the 5 books? Yeah.
So that first one, and I got this from something I misinterpreted Stephen Pressfield saying. So Stephen Pressfield wrote Gates of Fire, Legend of Bagger Vance, Campaign, wrote a series of books on creativity that starts with the War of Art. But what I thought he said on Joe Rogan podcast was that he used to take a yellow sticky and put it next to his typewriter with a one-word theme that would guide his books. And I thought, that's a fantastic idea. So that's what I did. So I wrote revenge, and really it was revenge without constraint, but revenge is what I put on a yellow sticky and put on my MacBook Pro as I was writing that first one. Later I would find out that that's not what he said really on Rogan. What he said was he was telling a story about a playwright in New York who would write 1 or 2 or 3 sentences that would guide the theme of the play.
Wow. Okay.
So somehow I misinterpreted that, but I'm glad I did, because I really think that it guided me. And when the book got to New York and got to Simon & Schuster and got to Emily Bessler, who's my editor and publisher at Simon & Schuster, Emily Bessler Books is the imprint, there were very few content edits. And I think that's because that revenge on that sticky note just kept me on the path and didn't let me deviate too much. And if I did, it was for the important part. So it's directly tied back to revenge, or more importantly, indirectly tied back to revenge. So it had to have that touch point no matter what I did. And the edits from New York for that first one were, hey, would he really say this here? Would he really do this here? And would he really, I forget the third one. Very few. And I thought, when I sent it off to New York, and Emily Bessler, who's the editor for Brad Thor, Vince Flynn, now Kyle Mills, taking on the Mitch Rapp series, that if she wanted to put exploding robots from outer space in there, guess what was going in? Exploding robots from outer space.
Totally, right.
But she had really no content edits except for those very, very minor ones. So I think that having that theme for any author out there, having that is very important. It keeps you on track throughout the whole process. Second one, my character was not ready to just jump right into another adventure. He needed to go on a journey. And so that second one was really about learning to live again, and about violent redemption. So that was the yellow sticky for that one, violent redemption, and that guided that whole process. So I didn't think I thought it would be disingenuous to the reader if, after all the traumatic events of the first book, if I just picked him up and just dropped him into another adventure. So he had to go on this journey and learn to live, find that next mission in life, and of course that's when the CIA comes back in and grabs him and makes him an offer he can't refuse.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
So where did you, in your history, maybe you've talked about this before, was Africa a place that you spent a lot of time in and fell in love with at some point? Because the depth where you go into, there's so many nested loops inside that of the different soldiers or the different, how they guarded their land and stuff like that. Is that something that you spent time either studying, or did you spend time there?
Yeah, so I went before my time in the military. I'd been to Kenya, I'd been to Morocco, I'd been to Egypt, and then in the military I went to Mali. But really for that second book, before I'd even submitted the first one to Simon & Schuster, I was already writing the second one. And I knew that I had to go to Mozambique because that plays a central role. And I'd already been in that second novel. I'd already been to the other places that play central roles. I've been specifically Morocco and Ukraine. So I'd been to both of those places before, but I hadn't been to Mozambique. So I was already on a plane to Mozambique after I got out of the military to put boots on the ground and to really weave that local flavor into the novel. So I remembered the story about John Grisham writing A Time to Kill, and he couldn't give that book away, and then he writes The Firm, and then we have a John Grisham novel every year since. But if he had gotten discouraged and hadn't written the second book because he couldn't give the first one away, which I think is arguably one of his best works, he'd still probably be practicing law, or maybe just retiring right now from the practice of law, and we never would have all those books and movies and all the careers that were started and accelerated because they starred in those films. Matthew McConaughey in particular. So I always knew I was going to write that second one. So that was. And then when I got back from that trip, that's when I sent it to Simon & Schuster, the first book, and then off to the races from there. But third book was really about the dark side of man through the dynamic of
Which can I interrupt you real quick?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things what you just talked about is one of the things that I know Rich and I were talking about you on the way here, and just even with our friend Nick Norris and just other people, like you just deciding you were going to go do this and like didn't let the accolades like encourage you like because there weren't any at first. You just did it. So congrats on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and I wasn't coming from politics or sports with any sort of a following, had no social media accounts even, didn't know anything about doing that sort of thing, just kept them at bay because the military at that time anyway, it couldn't do any good for you. Now it's interesting, and now I get to explore this in the pages of my novels. Like now if you don't have a social media following of some point or an online presence, then that's the red flag. Whereas 20 years ago or 15 years ago, if you did, then they could piece together your unit and who's gone and who's coming home and how many people, like all sorts of information you can get open source and from different algorithms. But now if you don't have it, now that's the red flag that pops up. So it is in intelligence circles. It's really there's a lot, especially when you add facial recognition to that and some of the other things that our intelligence service on the dark side have to do. But yeah, that third one, Dark Side of Man, through the dynamic of Hunter and Hunted. Yeah, and that, I think the first one and the third one, if I was to poll everybody, maybe even Savage Son would be people's favorites. If I was to take a very large unscientific poll, that would be people's favorites. But the third one is the one I wanted to write first. And when I first started this out, I wrote about 6, 7, 8, 9 different one-page executive summaries and put them all on the table. And it was very clear to me that I needed to start with the terminal list. It had to come out of the gate just as hard as could possibly be. And the characters weren't developed enough to write Savage Son yet. Yeah, I had to get them there. And I wanted to write Savage Son because in 6th grade I read Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell. It's a short story. And even back then I said one day I will write a thriller that pays tribute to that short story. So that's Savage Son.
Okay, I want to stick on Savage Son for a second. So I just want to say, so one of the coolest things about Jack's books are that you can read them out of order. Like you can jump in there. You do a great job of tying them back. Obviously, if you can start with Terminal, it's better. But Savage Son was one of those where I found myself doing this again in The Blood, but like where you had me mid-scene and I had to stop and be like, because like you got just one of the scenarios is there's guys on target or moving through the mountains, and then a dog. I mean, you can actually tell the rest of the story that you're comfortable with, but like ends up saving all their lives. Yeah,
alerts. Yeah.
And I'm going like, oh my gosh, like I can't even imagine what it would be like to not have a dog.
Yeah. Well, now we can't. Now it's become a part of the team. The dogs have become part of the team after the last 20 years at war, and they've saved so many guys' lives over these last 20 years. So it was very natural also to incorporate a dog into that one in particular. So that was cool. And I have plenty of friends who have worked in the dog programs, John Devine at Devine Canine and Mike Ritland out there as well, both those guys. And I like to reach out to people, and especially if I don't have, if it's something I just have a minor touch point with, like I was never in the dog program, but I know who to reach out to and talk to about that sort of thing. And I did that for the show too with Chris Pratt. We have a scene with a a dog in it there, two scenes, and I was reaching out to the guy saying, hey, how can we do this? What would the dogs do here? And is this realistic? Or, so I got a little more of an education by talking through some of the scenes in the terminal list with them, and then incorporating some of that into the show. But yeah, I think dogs will be coming back in some future novels. They've been pretty popular.
Yeah. And then 4,
Devil's Hand. Devil's Hand. Yeah. So that one, I wanted to put myself in the shoes of our enemy. So it was really that one was really about what has the enemy learned by watching us on the field of battle for the last 20 years at war. Yep. And so I started writing that one, and then COVID hit, and I was in the enemy's shoes. So let's say China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, a superpowered individual, a terrorist organization. What have they learned over the last 20 years watching us in Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, maybe some other places around the world? And then COVID hits, and I thought, well, I'm in the enemy's shoes right now. They're certainly learning something from our response to COVID. What would that be if I was the enemy? What would I incorporate into future battle plans? And then a summer of civil unrest hits. Yeah. And so once again, the enemy is not just watching that with a passing glance, like they're taking lessons and applying that to future battle plans. Then a very contentious election cycle and political season, and of course they're taking lessons and applying them to their battle plans. So that became a lot more timely than I thought at the outset. And that one has a bioweapon component to it, and something I didn't have a touch point with in the military. So I went deep down the rabbit hole into bioweapons and bioweapons defense, and incorporated all that into the novel. And that one I felt like I was a journalist. Because I did as much research as I could, but then that really just gave me a foundation from which to ask people questions. And when you talk to people with touch points in bioweapons research, they don't tell you too much, but maybe a little morsel here or there, and then you can take those, and if you talk to enough people, and put that puzzle together. That's something similar that I did to In the Blood.
With the quantum, is it computing?
Quantum computing, quantum computers. And I didn't know anything about quantum computer. I thought a quantum computer was just a really big computer. And it's not. So I get to describe that in the novel, and for anyone that doesn't know what they look like, just type quantum computer into your search bar and click on images. But it's like a golden mess of wires suspended in a vacuum, like a Medusa, and it's quite stunning, actually. It's like a work of art. Going down the rabbit hole on capabilities of quantum computing, and then how artificial intelligence is tied to quantum computing, and then the mass data storage and surveillance of U.S. citizens. So all of that plays a prominent role in this new novel.
Well, do you? I just want to make sure. Do you? Like, that was the other side. Like, In the Blood is violent. There's a lot of good violence in it. It's unbelievable. And the ending is there's 2 times in that book that I just stopped. One was meeting Alice. Like, what in the hell is that? Rich, will you press the button, please? Is that like real? And I know you've already said in our podcast that you can't even explain how much more real it is because if people won't believe you.
Yeah. That's what the people that I was talking to that had touch points there in that sector of national security, what they made a point of saying to me, like each and every one, and it was something, each one said something very similar to, hey, we could tell you more, but that would put your book in the science fiction category.
Yeah, there's some books in the past, like even if I went back 12 years ago, not your novels obviously, but like just other famous authors that started talking about like like bio warfare, and I was like, this is getting a little kind of hokey. And then COVID happens, and I was like, wow, they were really ahead of schedule. Yeah. And I stopped reading some of their novels. But I actually think after what we've experienced the last 2 years, people are probably more likely to believe what's possible.
Maybe. It's, if you wrote something 10 years ago, 15 years ago about just reality today, it might be science fiction. You might think it was science fiction. And some people wouldn't have believed it. The Amazon reviews would say, impossible, this could never happen, that sort of thing. And then, lo and behold, we've had the last few years in this country, which, it's a seismic shift in a lot of for a lot of us, for the nation.
What was your biggest, when you were going on the quantum computing aspect of it, because I don't want to give away anything in the blood, it's just so good, but what was like your kind of like biggest surprise or biggest like eye-opening thing? Because I apply everything to my kids, right? Like, what world are they going to live in 15 years, right? What was your biggest eye-opening surprise or...
I mean, I didn't know anything about quantum computing. So each and everything that I read about it was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Oh, that's interesting. And then when I talked to these different people that actually work in that field, then I was like, oh my gosh, what are the repercussions of this? If things continue to evolve at this pace or accelerate, because that's what technology does, it accelerates as you move forward. Where are we going to be in 5 years? Where are we going to be in 10 years? What does that mean as far as already controlling behaviors with big tech companies? We see the possibilities there, and now we're actually controlling thoughts. But all that information that is out there and what they can feed you and how they can divide us, and who does that benefit? Politicians and, well, those tech companies. So that's, I mean, we all know that that's going on, but just seeing the pace at which, I guess that's it, the pace at which things are evolving is so alarming that you can't even predict where we're going to be in 5 years. Certainly 10 years from now, a decade from now, if you look at the acceleration of the last decade, it's scary.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you have that opportunity to take that challenge on. As the rest of us just read your books to get filled in. That's awesome, man. And so now you have a mini-series coming out with Chris Pratt.
Yep. That's coming out here July 1st, and it's looking good. It's tested off the charts with test audiences, so that Amazon is very thrilled about that, as am I, of course. But yeah, the way it came about was pretty crazy in that the book was going to come out in March of 2018, and in November of 2017, an old buddy from the SEAL teams calls me and first asked if I remember him, and his name is Jared Shaw, and I said, of course. And then he said, hey, do you remember what you did for me in the SEAL teams? And I didn't remember. And he said, well, you're the only person that sat me down in your office, talked to me about transitioning out, introduced me to people in the private sector, and no one else did that. And I really appreciate it, and I always wanted to thank you. And I said, no problem. How's it going? And he said, it's going great, but I heard you have a book coming out. And I said, yeah, it's coming out in a few months. I have this galley copy, which is like a early rough draft I can send you. And he said, I'd like that, but I'd like to give it to a friend of mine. And I said, who's that? And he said, Chris Pratt. I was like, oh, well, that's convenient, because as I was typing this thing, I thought of Chris Pratt playing this role.
Isn't that
interesting? He's the only person that I thought about playing this role. And Antoine Fuqua is the only person I thought about directing. And now Antoine's directing, and Chris is starring, and then we're all three executive producers.
Yeah, that's got to be like, so when you sit back with your wife or whatever, you guys sitting there having a drink, or just have a little bit of time, which I know you're looking forward to having a lot of it, hopefully. What do you, do you just sit back and like take a deep breath and be like, wow, look what's going on right now?
I don't know. I feel like I've been in a full-on sprint.
You have been,
and it feels like a startup. I didn't really realize that at the outset, that writing is business like any other, startup like any other. I thought you just went to a cabin up in the mountains and wrote and sent the manuscript to New York, and maybe you did like one interview or something, and then you started the next book. I didn't really realize that you have to do everything you would have to do for any business, any product, and that's the budget and marketing and advertising and social media and engagement and campaigns around launches and all these different things. But that you can now be involved in as an author. You can leverage the new media, whereas 1985, 1975, 65, you couldn't, because there was no new media. It was based on legacy media back then, and whoever your publicist could get you an interview with, and so there were still kingmakers back then. And legacy media still. I mentioned in one of the books in The Devil's Hand. I talk about how those kingmakers they don't really get that they're not kingmakers anymore, because you can go out there and you can build these things now. You can build an audience. You can use these platforms in a way to impact people's lives in a positive way. I try to add value to people's lives every day with everything that I do on a social channel or a blog post or whatever it might be. But we have options today. You don't have to sit there and wait for your publisher to do something.
Yes.
So you have the option of treating it like a startup and getting in there every single day and building it like you build a business around anything else.
Well, you started. So how did you decide? Because I actually think like your books are awesome. I can't wait to watch the miniseries. But what I've turned more people onto, and I think is awesome, which then has created a book stack in my house, is your podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Was that just something you want to do? Did anyone encourage you to do that, or how did that kind of come about?
So I looked at everything like I looked at the battlefield, because I had no background, and I think this was helpful that I didn't have a background in an industry or with a company that allowed me to say, hey, you know what I did at my last company? We did this, or this is what we do. This is what you do. These are the best practices. I didn't have any best practices. I didn't have anything in the marketing side, advertising side, social media side, podcasts, and nothing. So I just looked at it like the battlefield. Like you're always adapting. The enemy's always adapting. You're looking for gaps in the enemy's defenses. You're looking to capitalize on momentum. So I just looked at the landscape, and it was very obvious that it would make sense to do the things that I could do to add value to people's lives so that I could build readership, which allows me then to do what I love doing, which is the writing. So so I started with social media platforms, just engaging there, thanking people there, and then I started getting a lot of questions around contentious issues, and I realized very quickly that social media doesn't lend itself to thoughtful discussions on these sorts of things. In fact, it encourages the opposite. Encourages them to devolve in very rapidly. So I thought, you know what? I'll start a podcast. So for people that have a question about something, I can say, listen to my podcast. And kind of like with sniper weapon systems, it's important to know your capabilities and your limitations. And so I got as far as being able to buy that little podcast, whatever thing with they plug in the headsets into and have the sound and all that stuff.
The mixer.
Whatever it's called. And then get a little tripod for the camera. Got as far as turning those on and recording. So... And that was that worked my way right up to my limitation right there.
That's awesome.
Trying to figure out how to put something on a platform, how to do a graphic. Like, no, can't do any of that. So I stagnated for a little bit with a few of the podcasts that I recorded earlier, just sitting there on the cards.
Sure.
And then reached out to friends at Ironclad, which is a company in Virginia Beach, and their media company there. And they were getting into the podcast space, and so we partnered up, and they do all the technical stuff. So all I have to do is hit record, and they do everything else. So capabilities and limitations are important, and then it seemed to kind of hit it right out of the gate. People really responded to it, and I was having great conversations with interesting people anyway. So I kind of thought also, hey, why don't I just record some of these and put them out there?
Well, how busy you're going to be forever. It's like, hey, you want to catch up? Great. Why don't we just record the conversation, man? Because it's all the good stuff. That's why when you came in, we're all talking about stuff.
I know, you got to record right away.
Somebody should be recording this right now because we're missing some good stories and great segues. Couple specifics inside the book. I can't help but take notes, and I think this is what separates you from a lot of authors right now. And everyone has their own style, so it's
subjective.
It's just what I'm appreciating about it is like the relationship between James Reese and Reef's parents. And the depth of conversation, it was in the blood. My mom passed away in the last year at the age of 85. I grew up in a family of 13. So we're very lucky. Like we have, 60 grandkids. We're all around each other. My dad passed away a couple years ago. So when it's when James looks at them as they become like pseudo parents, or not pseudo is probably the wrong word, but then the depths of their conversation of her sitting him down, especially in the blood, where she, there's parts of that there that it made me think, and I don't know where you were inspired to write this scene, so I'm kind of setting it up by talking too much. But where she talked about how the men went off to war.
I know exactly.
And she said how they had to protect their land. But then this phrase is what grabbed me was, she's like, and it was the most exciting time of my life. And I was like, that's so good.
Thank you. That ended up being my favorite chapter that I've ever written, and it wasn't in the original outline. I had a space there. I knew something had to go there that would develop the characters a little more. But it ended up being my favorite chapter that I've ever written out of all the books, and it's just a conversation between Caroline Hastings and James Reese. So no one's getting their head chopped off, no one's getting their eyes gouged out, or no one's getting eviscerated. But it's just them sitting down talking, and for whatever reason that became my favorite chapter. It's up on my website. I put it there. I put the preface, the prologue, and the first 3 chapters, and I put the first 3 chapters so that third one, that conversation, would be in there for people if they wanted to check it out. But for whatever reason, that was a very emotional one to write, and I loved writing that chapter.
But it does symbolize too, also the strength of a warrior man. Even if you go to 300, right? The most powerful men had the most powerful women, right? And without her, that all falls apart. and there's that moment. So it was really, really powerful. The last comment I want to make, and then we'll segue. And Rich, I'm going to leave a question for you. So I'm putting pressure on you here. Yeah, because we want to be respectful of Jack's time. But the mystery around his dad. Right? I mean, that's just so good on open loops after open loop. I did comment, by the way, on one of your Instagram posts. I'm like, you're going to, like you said, what should be the offshoots of this series? I'm like, is it prequel? Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Could take in James's dad. I mean, you don't have to answer it.
No, I did that very intentionally, dropping things throughout, and I got that from. I like that when I see that in other novels. I was just kind of gravitated towards that as something that I enjoyed. Just wondering, hey, what's the author going to go back to this, or why'd they do that? So I did that very intentionally. Drop things about Reese's dad, Reese's grandfather. On the Hastings side, Rafe, his dad, his grandfather. So I have options there to work with, and Stephen Hunter is one of my he's a friend now, which is amazing. But I read his stuff my whole life, and Impact, of course, introduces the world to Bob Lee Swagger, and there's a couple of JFK assassination sentences in there, and so I asked Stephen if he did that intentionally, so he could write 15 years later, write the third bullet. And he said no. He said that there was a parallel storyline with the JFK assassination, and for whatever reason, he didn't think it worked, or maybe his editor didn't think it worked or something, and he went to take all of it out. But back then, there wasn't like a Word document where you could just do a word search for JFK. You had to like physically go through and flip through the manuscript and take out, cross them out and everything. And so he missed a couple. But those are some some great lines in there. I love when there's just like a little bit of hint of something when you're like, I should know about this, or should I know about this? I'm going to research this, or I'm going to fold this page over here and I'm going to go back to this because this seems really interesting to me. So I love that in novels. So
you have a lot of that, even in South Africa stuff. I'm just realizing how ignorant I am to a lot, which is fun actually. Learning. I want to say one more thing too on this, and then why people need to read your books. I think that we're in a weird time of our history. I really do believe in that, where it's like a comedian, a podcaster, Joe Rogan. I mean, Joe is now like Madonna. Like you just say Joe, and everyone's like, oh, it's Joe, or you say Rogan, and everyone knows it. And now like a tech billionaire are making more progress in ways that are just really, really, I think, productive. And it's good to have people with voices who I think have common sense, which I think you do. Do you ever feel like, the phrase "the pen is mightier than the sword" is somehow applying to you right now? It's kind of a new position.
It's good to have a backup. So I do think of it in those terms, but when it comes to James Reese, but no, I think these are more when you're talking about it in those terms, therapeutic for me to write. Maybe therapeutic for people to read, because certainly our senior level elected representatives, not leaders, they're elected representatives, give me a lot to work with.
100%.
And so I can do things to them in the novels that I can't do in real life because I'll go to jail. So it gives me some freedom there. And there's something about that theme of revenge, and that we talked about the different themes of all the books, but there's still that theme of revenge that kind of weaves its way through all the novels, and I think there's something primal and visceral about that, and it takes us back to being around the campfire. I mean, there's a reason there's all these Death Wish movies, and there's a reason that there's all these that this theme of revenge keeps appearing over time, and throughout history, throughout all of literature, and at its base level, it takes us back to being around the fire and passing on lessons of the hunt and lessons of the fight to the next generation, because that was done orally through telling stories, so you wouldn't have to go out and learn the lessons of the last battle over again in blood, or so that you could continue to feed your family and your tribe, your community. So these are stories, I think, that have an anchor anyway around that fire, and an anchor point in that primal nature of the hunt and of the fight.
Yeah, I love it. All right, Rich, what do you got?
Jack, you've accomplished so much in your career, famous author. You're spending time with your family. You're doing a lot of things. What's next on the Jack Carr bucket list? What do we got left to do?
Yeah, I want to be the two things I wanted to do from my earliest age. So serve my country in uniform, and then write thrillers. So now the goal is to move the genre forward with each and every book, even if it's just by a degree, and then always improve at my craft. And that's why I'm so excited about the reviews that are coming in for In the Blood, because it seems to be people's favorite so far, which is great. But I want to get better every time, because that's what I owe the readers. That's what I owe people that are on this journey with me, that are trusting me with that time. So every time I write something, it has to be better than the time before, and really that's where my focus is.
I like it.
Yeah, I love it. When does the Amazon series come out?
July 1st.
July 1st,
It's
baby.
looking good. The trailer or the teaser is out there now. There's a trailer that should be dropping sometime, maybe in the next month at some point. And
can we pre-order? Or?
It's on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, love it.
So yeah, if you have Amazon Prime, then you've got it already, and you can watch it. I guess at midnight on the 1st. That's 4th of July weekend, and
I love
it. It's hour each and 8 episodes, and it's good.
Are you dumping it all in one night? All 8? Yeah. So for all of you who want to enjoy your family after July 2nd, and just bang through it.
Yeah. Watch it on the biggest screen you possibly can. Because when I was doing all the edits in post-production, I was looking at it on my little computer, and I was giving my notes and all that stuff, and the timestamps and doing that sort of thing. And so I didn't see it on a big screen until I got the finals. And then I watched the locked final episodes on a big screen with sound. It was awesome and so much different than looking at it on my computer. So recommend everybody watch it on the biggest screen they possibly can.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right, everybody, it's Ed O'Keefe. Thank you, Jack. This was amazing. The Terminal List, get the whole series. Just go to Amazon today, buy them all at once, because you're going to be addicted once you start. And then, let me know how you like this episode. And then when you come out with your next book, I'll make it even easier and come out wherever you're going to be again.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, brother.
Appreciate it.
Cool.
Hey, it's Ed. If you enjoyed this interview I just did with Jack Carr, then I absolutely guarantee you will love the interview I did with one of his teammates, Nick Norris. Nick's another team guy. He runs a company called Protect Products and has an amazing story. Great leader, good friend, and I definitely recommend that as well. Also, my interviews with Jesse Itzler, David Goggins are all kind of in this line as well. Joel Runyon's another one that I think you'd enjoy a lot. If you run a digital business online, make sure you check out my free Facebook group online called Ed O'Keefe Unlimited Leads, Traffic, Conversion, and Monetization. We have businesses in there, everything from supplement businesses to high-ticket businesses and e-commerce businesses. So, as well as even like coaches for niches on showing other people how to grow their business. So anyhow, this is it. This is Ed. Thanks so much. Please subscribe to our channel or the podcast and share with friends that you believe would love these episodes as well. Thanks so much.
Hey, it's Ed again. Hey, one last thing before you leave. First, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to the show. If you love this show or this episode and know someone who can benefit, please copy it and share it with them. Also, if you can do me a favor and leave a quick review wherever you listen to these podcasts the most, whether it's Apple, Spotify, etc., it really will help us get the message out to more people. That's it. Thanks again, and make it a great day.